Welcome into Kicking the Rear podcast. My name is Joe Yarshin. Today on episode 10, we're going to be reviewing Atomic Habits. This is by James Clear. He is a #1 New York Times bestselling author, and I think this might be my favorite book I've reviewed so far. Certainly, I've taken the most amount of practical insights from it and applied it to my everyday life. So I'd like to go into every single chapter in this book, and early on in the review, I've underlined several pages in the beginning. So I'm going to do a lot of quotes on this one and then try to break down each chapter as it applies to the lessons I learned from the book. And without further ado, let's get into it. To start, in chapter 1, James Clear discusses how habits can compound for you or against you. Productivity compounds. He says that the more tasks you can handle without thinking, the more your brain is free to focus on other areas. Automation is big for entrepreneurs. So this concept is very applicable to almost everything in life, whether it is your job, working out, your hobbies, your family life, your routines. He drops a quote here from Warren Buffett. He says, "That's how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest." And he talks about this idea of plateau of latent potential. So when you finally break through the plateau of latent potential, people call it an overnight success. In the end of the chapter, I had a few different pages underlined. On 24, he says, if you're an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business. Your system is how you test product ideas, hire employees, and run marketing campaigns. Focus on your systems instead, because goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are the best for making real progress. On page 25, I have underlined, and if successful and unsuccessful people share the same goals, then the goal cannot be what differentiates the winners from the losers. It wasn't the goal of winning the Tour de France that propelled British cyclists to the top of the sport. He talks about how the cycling team changed 1% of their activities to go from being mediocre to being the best in their sport. He goes in a really long-winded explanation of this, but it's a good example of how changing 1% of your activities can lead to a dramatic outcome. He says, fix the inputs and the outputs will fix themselves. A systems first mentality provides the antidote. When you fall in love with the process rather than the byproduct, you don't have to wait to give yourself permission to be happy. You can be satisfied anytime your system is running. And a system can be successful in many different forms, not just the one you first envisioned. Ultimately, is your commitment to the process that will determine your progress. So, breakdown of the summary of the first chapter. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Getting 1% better every day counts for a lot in the long run. The CEO of our company actually references this book. A lot of people in our company reference this book and this concept of getting 1% better every day in your job. But especially in your life, this is important. Habits are double-edged swords. They can work for you or against you. Why understanding the details is essential. Small changes often appear to make no difference until you cross a critical threshold. The more powerful outcomes of any compounding process are delayed. You need to be patient. An atomic habit is a little habit that is part of a larger system. Just as atoms are the building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the building blocks of remarkable results. If you want better results, then forget about setting goals. Focus on the systems. You do not need to rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. In chapter 2, quote here on page 32. Imagine if two people are resisting smoking or a cigarette. When offered the smoke, the first person says, "No, thanks, I'm trying to quit." Sounds reasonable, but the person still believes they're a smoker who's trying to be something else. They're hoping the behavior will change while carrying around the same beliefs. The second person, however, declines by saying, "No, thanks, I'm not a smoker." It's a small difference, but this statement signals a shift in identity. The second person believes they're not a smoker, therefore they're less likely to smoke. I know I'm guilty of like saying, oh, I'm terrible with directions. I like to use my GPS when I drive anywhere, but just the act of saying like, oh, I'm terrible with directions kind of removes all ownership of that. And you're kind of identifying with being a person that's bad at directions. So I've kind of shifted my focus on how I do my self-talk. So page 37, the more evidence you have for a belief, the more strongly you believe it. So he talks about how your views and opinions get stronger the more you find evidence for it, no matter what it is. Page 39, simple 2-step process for getting a new identity or having that new evidence to support that. Decide the type of person you want to be. Prove it to yourself with small wins. Chapter summary in chapter 2. There are 3 levels of change. You have the outcome change, the process change, and the identity change. All 3 are necessary. The most effective way to change your habits is to focus not on what you want to achieve, but who you wish to become. I love that. Again, just kind of going into the identity piece of it. Your identity emerges out of your habits. Every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become rather than the person you are. Becoming the best version of yourself requires you to continuously edit your beliefs and upgrade and expand your identity. The real reason habits matter is not because they can get you better results, although they can do that, but because they can change your beliefs about yourself. So again, chapter 1, chapter 2, super powerful already. Chapter 3 goes on discussing the habit loops, the 4 laws of behavior change, how to break those. In the chapter summary breakdown, a habit is a behavior that has been repeated enough times to become automatic. The ultimate purpose of habits is to solve the problems of life with as little energy and effort as possible. For example, when I do a workout now, if I don't have to think about the workout or the individual exercises in the workout, it makes the overall experience super easy because the less thinking I have to do, the more automatic it is, the more likely I'm able to do that activity in the time constraints that I have, and the more reliable I am and accountable for those actions during the workout. Any habit that can be broken down into a feedback loop that involves 4 steps: the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. And then he discusses the 4 laws of behavior change are a simple set of rules that we can use to better our habits and build habits. They are: make it obvious. So make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. It's really simple stuff, but like it's important that you do all 4 of those. I've been taking that advice just in my daily routines, in my morning, afternoon, evening routines, and it's helped me a lot individually just to remember to do things that I need to do. He goes on page 62. He quotes Carl Jung: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So I think a lot of this has to do with the importance of this quote in this chapter is if you're self-aware, you're more likely to change the behavior than if you aren't honest with yourself. Page 66, the process of behavior change always starts with awareness. Strategies like pointing and calling and the habit scorecard. He goes into the strategy of like literally saying out loud what you're doing throughout the day. This helps you to identify the current habits you have and how to move past the bad ones. He talks about this habit scorecard. So he has you write down your exact routine every single day from the mundane to the more complex. And then you do pluses and minuses or equal sign if it's a neutral behavior to identify how many positive things you're doing in your life and how many negative things you're doing. For example, waking up would be a neutral thing. Checking your phone, that might be a negative. You go to the bathroom, neutral. You weigh yourself. You take pills. You vitamins. You make breakfast, like whatever your routine is. So he kind of goes into that analysis and seeing where you stand after that. Chapter 5, he discusses implementation intention. Intend to implement a particular habit. This can be the most effective when you add a time and a location to it. So broadly speaking, the format of creating an implementation intention is when X situation arises, I will perform Y response. I tried this out with like a workout routine. I've tried this out with podcasts, and I've tried it out with chores around the house. Like, I will take out the trash tomorrow at this time. I'm more likely to remember it than if I just say, oh, I'll take it out tomorrow. Like, if you say a time and a place, like, I will take out the trash tomorrow at my house, or whatever example you want to use. But I know I've tried this method and it does work. I've underlined another quote here. Obviously, you're never going to just work out without conscious thought, but like a dog salivating at a bell, maybe you start to get antsy around the time you normally work out. So the physiological response to doing the same things every day, I thought this was very interesting, because I know that if I don't work out at a certain time of day, I start to get antsy. And he literally had a quote about it, but this can be anything in your life, any particular activity that you do. If you don't do it at that time of day, or if you don't do it, in that time frame you have set for yourself, you kind of get reminded by it on your own, like autopilot. He talks about the Diderot effect. Habit stacking. This is probably the coolest, or one of the coolest things in the entire book. I've used it a lot. The habit stack method. Page 76, finances. When I want to buy something over $100, I'll wait 24 hours before purchasing. Just an example of how to use some of these habit stacks and reverse engineer them into your daily life. At the end of this chapter breakdown, he says the first law of behavior changes to make it obvious. The two most common cues are time and location. Again, creating implementation intention strategy, you can use pair a habit with specific time and location. The implementation intention formula is I will do blank at blank time in blank location. Habit stacking is a strategy you compare with the new habit and the current habit. The habit stacking formula after is after I blank, I will do blank. So chapter 6 kind of just talks about like motivation. It's overrated. He on page 86 here, I underlined a few things. He says a few ways you can redesign your environment and make cues for your preferred habits more obvious. If you want to remember to take your medication at night, put your pill bottle directly next to the faucet on the bathroom counter, maybe where you brush your teeth every night. If you want to practice guitar more frequently, place your guitar stand in the middle of the living room. If you want to remember to send more thank you notes, keep stack of stationery on your desk. If you want to drink more water, fill up water bottles each morning and place them in common areas around your home. So it's kind of like making these things obvious, putting them in situations where you have to see them. Page 88, habits can be easier to change in a new environment. I know that when I moved to Tennessee, a lot of new habits I tried to start were much easier to accomplish because I was in a new environment. Everything changed. So my way of thinking, my neural connections, like everything in my brain just operated differently. So if you can kind of, he talks about if you can separate your activities in different rooms in the house, for example, page 89, create a separate space for your work, your studying, your exercise, your entertainment, your cooking. So one space, one use. I thought that was really impactful. The next page, he also says you can do the same thing with digital spaces. Some people use like a computer only for writing and then a tablet for reading and his phone for social media and texting. I thought that was kind of cool. Chapter 7, page 92, I underlined, he said, instead, disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. So making it easier for yourself, cue-induced wanting. Make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad ones invisible. So like if you want to drink less alcohol, this helped me. I stopped buying it, but also if there was alcohol in the house, I'd put it in the back of the fridge or somewhere where I couldn't see it every day. Or if you're trying not to eat like junk food, like if someone in your house has to eat junk food, then maybe you put the chips in a spot where you're not going to see them. So that way you're not tempted. At the end of this chapter summary breakdown, the inversion of the first law of behavior change is make it invisible. Once a habit is formed, it's unlikely to be forgotten. People with high self-control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than it is to resist it. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. Self-control is a short-term strategy, but not a long one. So then let's go into chapter 8 now. The dopamine-driven feedback loop. So this is kind of a long section, but anticipation of the reward, not the fulfillment of it, that gets us to take action. He talks about like gambling addicts, drug addicts, like this dopamine response, and the dopamine spike is responsible for a lot of behavior and habitual things that we take part in every day. The habit stacking method plus temptation bundling formula. He goes into what that means, but the chapter summary says the second law of behavior change is make it attractive. The more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it's to become habit forming. Habits are dopamine-driven feedback loop. When dopamine rises, so does our motivation to act. It's the anticipation of a reward again, not the fulfillment of that reward, that gets us to take the action. The greater the anticipation, the greater the dopamine spike. Temptation bundling is one way to make your habits more attractive. Strategies to pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do. Chapter 9, page 117. If one person in a relationship lost weight, the other partner would also slim down at 1/3 of the time. He talks about a study, a groundbreaking study where 12,000 people for 32 years, and like their partners in weight loss. And it's kind of funny because like I started kind of dieting and exercising, and I didn't even really expect, like my wife to do that, but she on her own was doing a lot of that stuff. So it kind of like the habits impact people close to you. So if you're doing something every day, all the time, more likely that somebody around you will do that too. I thought that was just kind of interesting for anyone that's married or has a spouse that's or significant other that's, trying to work out or exercise. The chapter summary in this one: the culture we live in determines what behaviors that are attractive to us. We tend to adopt habits that are praised and approved by our culture based on strong desire to fit in and belong to a tribe. So this is kind of like tribe mentality. We tend to imitate the habits of 3 social groups: the close family and friends, the many, the tribe, and the powerful, those with status and prestige. One of the most effective things you can do is build better habits, is join culture where your desired behavior are normal. You already have something in common. The normal behavior of the tribe often overpowers the desire behavior of the individual. Most days we'd rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves. This is kind of funny. And then if a behavior can get us approval, respect, and praise, we find it attractive. In chapter 10, he discusses the inversion of the second law of behavior change is make it unattractive. Every behavior has a surface level craving and a deeper underlying motive. Your habits are modern day solution to ancient desires. And the cause of your habits is actually the prediction that precedes them. The prediction leads to a feeling. Highlight the benefits of avoiding a bad habit to make it seem unattractive. Habits are attractive when we associate them with positive feelings, and unattractive when we associate them with negative feelings. So create a motivation ritual by doing something you enjoy immediately before a difficult habit. This kind of tricks our minds into doing the habit more often and frequently. If you're trying to read more, like I've been employing the strategy of having hot tea before I read. I think it's something enjoyable. I enjoy reading too. So, but if you don't enjoy it or something that you don't have to do, doing something that you do like to do right before helps. Chapter 11 summary. The third law of behavior change is to make it easy. So the most effective form of learning is practice, not planning. It's kind of like the just do it slogan in Nike. You can plan a bunch, but ultimately you're wasting your time. If you can spend that amount of time doing something, you should just do it. Focus on taking action, not being in motion. So I've heard Kenny McElroy say all the time on his podcast, have a business, not a busyness. Habit formation is the process by which a behavior becomes progressively more automatic through repetition. The amount of time you have been performing a habit is not as important as the number of times you've performed it. Chapter 12, he discusses human behavior follows the law of least effort. We will naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work and create an environment where doing the right thing is easy as possible. I think that's so accurate, is like the things that we can make easier or simpler, we're more likely to replicate and do them more frequently. So reduce the friction associated with good behaviors. When friction is low, habits are easy. Increase the friction associated with bad behaviors. When friction is high, habits are difficult. Prime your environment to make future actions easier. He talked about an example of like television watching. If you're trying to reduce your amount of like binge watching or something, every time you I think he discusses it more in terms of like playing video games. If you don't want to play as many video games, unplug it every time you play, or unplug the TV every time you watch. Makes it harder the next time you want to do it. Or you move it into a closet or move it into another room, so you have to like set it up every time you want to do it. Chapter 13, habits can be completed in a few seconds, but continue to impact your behavior for minutes or hours afterward. Many habits occur at decisive moments, choices that are like a fork in the road and either send you in the direction of a productive day or an unproductive one. So kind of setting up little momentum builders throughout your day. The 2-minute rule states that when you start a new habit, it should take you less than 2 minutes to do. The more you ritualize the beginning of a process, the more likely it becomes that you can slip into a state of deep focus that's required to do great things. Standardize before you optimize. I love that quote. You can't improve a habit that doesn't exist. So you have to make it a standard before you can make it better. Chapter 14, the inversion of the third law of behavior changes make it difficult. The commitment device is a choice you make in the present that locks in better behavior in the future. The ultimate way to lock in future behavior is to automate your habits. He uses this word a lot, automate. One-time choices like buying a better mattress or enrolling in an automatic savings plan. They're single actions that automate your future habits and deliver increasing returns over time. Love that. Using technology to automate your habits is the most reliable and effective way to guarantee the right behavior. Immediately, I implemented like iPhone reminders. So anytime I want to do something by a certain time, I set a reminder on my phone. It alerts me, so I don't even have to think about it. It's automatic, it's automated, and it's very effective. Highly recommend that if anyone is looking to not forget things. Chapter 15. The fourth law of behavior change is make it satisfying. We're more likely to repeat a behavior when the experience is satisfying. Human brains evolved to prioritize immediate rewards over delayed rewards. So that kind of instant gratification concept, we can use it to positively influence our actions. The cardinal rule of behavior change is what is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. To get a habit to stick, you need to fuel immediately successful, even if it's in a small way. The first 3 laws of behavior change: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy. Increase the odds that a behavior will be performed this time. The 4th law, make it satisfying, increases the odds that the behavior will be repeated next time. So kind of going into that subtle difference there. Chapter 16, one of the most satisfying feelings is the feeling of making progress. In human nature, I would have to agree with that. Like anytime I'm making progress, I'm feeling satisfied. A habit tracker is a simple way to measure whether you did a habit, like marking an X on a calendar. Habit trackers and other visual forms of measurement can make your habits satisfying, providing clear evidence for your progress. I hate to use the workout example again, but like every time I work out, I write down my workout and I mark down little check marks, little tallies, and because I have anywhere from 3 to 5 sets, and every time I mark a set, I write it down in my notebook, and then when I'm done, I see that it's stacked on there. I have all 5 sets or all 3 sets or whatever workout done for the day, so I love doing that. Never break the chain. Try to keep the habit streak alive. Never miss something twice. If you miss a day, try to get back on track as quickly as possible. this kind of like gives yourself some grace. Nobody's perfect. So if you're starting a new habit, he said, just like start it the next day. If you miss a day, it's okay. It happens, but you got to immediately get back on it if you're wanting to do it long term. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean it's the most important thing. A lot of intangible things are unmeasurable. Chapter 17, the inversion of the fourth law of behavior changes to make it unsatisfying. So we're less likely to repeat a bad habit if it's painful or unsatisfying. An accountability partner can create an immediate cost to inaction. We care deeply about what others think of us, and we do not want others to have a lesser opinion of us. So like me releasing this podcast once a week, that's the expectation and standard I've set for myself. If enough people watch, they want to see the video. It would be disappointing if the video didn't come out once a week. A habit contract can be used to add a social cost to any behavior. It makes the costs of violating your promises public and painful. Knowing that someone else is watching you can be a powerful motivator. I agree with that a lot. The truth about talent. So he talks about that in chapter 18. And he says that the secret to maximizing your odds of success is to choose the right field of competition. So pick the right habit and progress is easy. Pick the wrong habit and life becomes a struggle. Genes cannot be easily changed, which means they provide a powerful advantage in favorable circumstances and a serious disadvantage in unfavorable circumstances. Habits become easier when they align with your natural abilities. So choose habits that best suit you. So if you suck at swimming, don't try to be Michael Phelps. It's kind of what he says in this chapter. He uses an example of physical gifts and abilities to demonstrate that. And I think it's really good because we want to do things, but just because we want to do things doesn't always mean it's a good fit. So identifying and being honest with yourself about what you're good at can help with the habit consistency. Play a game that favors your strengths. If you can't find a game that favors you, create one. Genes do not eliminate the need for hard work. They clarify it. They tell us what to work hard on. So I've heard from a few different entrepreneurs. Gary Vee's the one that comes to mind immediately. And he talks about doubling down on what you're good at instead of trying to get, to average at what you're bad at. Like, it's just such a waste of time. If you're good at something, double down on that activity. Chapter 19, the Goldilocks rule. It's kind of cool. It states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. So you don't want a task too hard. You don't want a task that's too easy. To achieve flow state, you want something that's just right at your ability. So the greatest threat to success is not failure, but boredom. As habits become routine, they become less interesting and less satisfying. We get bored. So anyone can work hard when they feel motivated. It's the ability to keep going when work isn't exciting that makes the difference with the habits. And professionals stick to the schedule. Amateurs let life get in the way. I really resonated with that chapter 2 as well. And then in chapter 20, just a lot to unpack in this whole book. But chapter 20, the upside of habits is that we can do things without thinking. The downside is we stop paying attention to little errors. Habits plus deliberate practice equals mastery. Reflection and review is a process that allows you to remain conscious of your performance over time. And then the tighter we cling to an identity, the harder it becomes to grow beyond it. Definitely my favorite book I've read in a long time. Favorite mindset book for sure. I don't know. Maybe Rich Dad Poor Dad was my favorite book of all time, but Atomic Habits definitely is in my top 5, top 3. So, I hope if I can just reach one person with this podcast, please give this book a chance. I think it will help you in your life, no matter what you're doing, even if you're not a real estate investment person. But if you are, I think this is going to help you a lot. So, thanks again for tuning in. Bippity boppity investment property. Have a great day. See you next week.